The last ember in the fireplace dimmed to a weak orange glow as Tess Foster huddled beneath her woolen blanket, the howls from outside growing louder with each passing minute. Wyoming Territory, 1876, not the place she had imagined starting a new life, especially not alone. The wolves had been trailing her wagon since sundown. At first, just distant howls carried on the wind, but now they circled close enough that she could hear their paws crunching through the fresh snow. Tess clutched her late father's rifle closer to her chest, though her hands shook too badly to aim properly if it came to that. 3 days out from Cheyenne, she should have reached her uncle's homestead by now, but the snowstorm had slowed her progress to a crawl. Now, with her horse having gone lame that afternoon, she was stranded in the wilderness with only the thin walls of her canvas-topped wagon between her and the growing pack outside. A wolf's shadow passed by the small gap in the wagon cover, and Tess stifled a scream. They were testing the perimeter, growing bolder by the minute. The first scratch against the wooden side of the wagon made her jump. Then came another, more insistent. The wagon rocked slightly as something heavy leaned against it. Tess raised the rifle, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The sudden crack of a gunshot split the night air, but it hadn't come from her weapon. Another shot followed, then 3 more in rapid succession. The wolves yelped and scattered. Tess crawled to the wagon opening and peered out into the darkness. "Hello," a deep voice called out. "Anyone in there?" Relief flooded through her body, almost making her dizzy. "Yes, I'm here." A man on horseback emerged from the shadows, rifle still at the ready as he scanned the surrounding darkness. He wore a long duster coated with snow, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the cold. "Those wolves will be back," he said, dismounting swiftly. "Are you hurt, madam?" "No, I'm fine," Tess replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "My horse went lame this afternoon. I couldn't continue." The stranger approached, leading his horse. As he drew closer, the moonlight revealed a face weathered by sun and wind, but not old, perhaps late 20s, with several days' worth of stubble and eyes that appeared alert and watchful. "Isaac Sullivan." He introduced himself with a brief tip of his hat. "Lucky I was passing through." "Tess Foster," she replied. "And yes, extraordinarily lucky, I thought." She trailed off, unwilling to voice the terror that had gripped her moments before. Isaac nodded, understanding without her having to finish. "We need to move. This isn't a good spot to spend the night." He glanced at her wagon. "What's wrong with your horse?" "Stepped wrong in a hidden hole. His foreleg is swollen." He moved to examine the animal, running experienced hands along the leg. "He'll recover with rest, but he won't be pulling anything tomorrow." Isaac straightened up. "I can get you to safety tonight, but we'll need to leave the wagon. Collect whatever you can't part with." "Leave my wagon?" "But all my possessions, madam." Isaac cut her off gently. "Those wolves will be back with more of their pack. The temperature's dropping, and your fire's almost out. Neither of us wants to be here when they return." Tess hesitated only briefly before nodding. She hurriedly gathered her most precious items: a photograph of her parents, the family Bible, a small pouch of coins, and a change of clothes. Isaac helped her secure them to his saddle. "What about my horse?" she asked, stroking the animal's muzzle. "We'll untether him. He can follow if he's able. If not." Isaac didn't finish the thought. Tess swallowed hard but nodded. The harsh realities of frontier life had become increasingly familiar since her father's passing 3 months ago. Isaac helped her mount his horse, then swung up behind her. The proximity to a stranger would normally have scandalized her, but tonight it meant survival. His warmth at her back was reassuring as they set off into the darkness. "My cabin's about 4 miles from here," Isaac explained as they rode. "It's not much, but it's sturdy, and there's a small stable for the horses." "You live alone?" Tess asked, then immediately regretted the question. "Yes, madam. Just me and the mountains." There was something in his tone, not bitterness, but perhaps resignation. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the occasional distant howl. Tess's lame horse followed behind, limping but keeping pace. "You're a long way from anywhere," Isaac observed eventually. "Where were you headed?" "My uncle's homestead near Shell Creek. After my father died, there wasn't much reason to stay in Ohio." "I'm sorry about your father," Isaac said, his voice softening. "Thank you." It was unexpected a fever took him quickly. Tess didn't mention how the subsequent weeks had been filled with unscrupulous suitors and business partners circling like vultures, eager to take advantage of a young woman alone. Her uncle's invitation had been a lifeline. Shell Creek is still a good day's ride from here, Isaac noted. Difficult terrain, especially with the snow. I'll manage, Tess said with more confidence than she felt. Isaac made a non-committal sound but didn't argue. The wind picked up, driving snowflakes against their faces. Tess found herself leaning back slightly, using Isaac's body as a shield against the biting cold. Not much further, he assured her. True to his word, within half an hour, a small cabin came into view. It was built against the side of a hill, with a corral and small stable nearby. Smoke rose from the chimney, indicating a fire had been left burning. You weren't planning to be gone long, Tess observed. Just checking my trap lines. Good thing I was. Isaac dismounted and helped her down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. He led the horses to the stable, ensuring both were settled before guiding Tess to the cabin. The interior was simple but neat: a table and 2 chairs, a small cook stove, a narrow bed in the corner, and shelves holding provisions and a few books. It's not much, Isaac said, almost apologetically. It's warm and safe, Tess replied, which makes it perfect at the moment. Isaac busied himself adding wood to the fire and putting on a pot of coffee. Tess stood awkwardly, unsure of her place in this man's home. Please, sit, he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. You must be exhausted. Tess sank gratefully into the chair, the warmth of the cabin beginning to seep into her chilled bones. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Sullivan. Isaac, please. He poured her a cup of coffee once it was ready. Forgive me for not having anything more substantial to offer. Wasn't expecting company. This is perfect, Tess said, warming her hands on the cup. They talked as the night deepened around the cabin. Isaac explained he'd been in Wyoming for 3 years, having come west from Pennsylvania after the war. He trapped in winter, hunted and prospected in summer, and occasionally took work with cattle drives when money was tight. And you? He asked. What brings a young woman to travel alone through such dangerous country? Tess told him about her father, the successful hardware business he'd built in Cincinnati, and how quickly it had fallen apart after his death. The business partners my father trusted turned out to be less than honorable, she explained. Within weeks, they'd manipulated the accounts to show debts that didn't exist. My options were to marry one of them or lose everything. So you chose a third option. Tess nodded. My uncle wrote years ago about the beauty of Wyoming and the opportunities here. He's a widower with no children. When I wrote to him about my situation, he immediately invited me to come live with him. Brave decision, Isaac commented. Necessary, Tess corrected, though I'm beginning to wonder if it was foolish as well. Not foolish, just perhaps too independent for your own good. A small smile softened his words. Something I understand well. As the night grew later, the sleeping arrangements became an obvious concern. Isaac insisted Tess take the bed while he would sleep on a bedroll near the fire. Despite her protests about displacing him, he was firm. I've slept on much worse, he assured her. Rest now. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to get you to your uncle's. Tess slept deeply, the exhaustion of her ordeal catching up with her. When she woke, morning light was streaming through the small window, and Isaac was already up, cooking something that smelled wonderful. Good morning, he greeted her. Hope you like venison. It's about all I have. It smells delicious, she replied, embarrassed to be caught still in bed. She quickly smoothed her hair and joined him at the table. Over breakfast, Isaac explained his plan. Your horse needs at least 3 days rest before he can travel. I'll escort you to your uncle's today, then bring your wagon later once your horse is recovered. That's too much trouble, Tess protested. You've already done so much. It's no trouble, Isaac insisted. Besides, it's not safe for you to travel alone, and I'm not one to leave a job half done. Tess wanted to argue further, but recognized the logic of his plan. Thank you. I'll find a way to repay your kindness. Isaac shook his head. Not necessary. They set out mid-morning under clear skies. Isaac had secured Tess's belongings to his pack horse and helped her mount his own horse while he walked alongside. Despite her insistence that they could take turns, he refused. I'm used to covering ground on foot, he explained. And the trail narrows ahead. Better this way. As they traveled, Tess found herself studying Isaac when he wasn't looking. There was something compelling about him, a quiet competence, a gentle strength. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way her suitors back home had been, with their pomaded hair and tailored suits. Yet his face, with its strong jaw and expressive eyes, drew her gaze repeatedly. They stopped at midday by a small stream to rest and eat some jerky Isaac had packed. As they sat on a fallen log, Tess finally asked the question that had been on her mind. Why do you live alone, so far from everyone? Isaac was quiet for a long moment. After the war, being around people was difficult. Too much noise, too many expectations. He looked out at the mountains. Out here, things make sense. Nature doesn't lie or pretend to be something it's not. Were you at Gettysburg? Tess asked softly. Her father had spoken of the battle with a haunted expression. Isaac nodded once. And Antietam, and a dozen other places I try not to remember. Tess didn't press further. They finished their meal in companionable silence before continuing their journey. As the day progressed, the terrain became more challenging. Isaac helped Tess across streams and steep inclines, his hands strong and steady. Each time he touched her, even through gloves and heavy clothing, Tess felt a warmth that had nothing to do with physical exertion. By late afternoon, they had covered significant ground but were still several hours from their destination. We should find shelter for the night, Isaac suggested, looking at the darkening sky. There's an old line shack used by cattlemen in the summer about half a mile ahead. It's not much, but it will keep us dry. The shack was indeed basic, a single room with a small stove and 2 crude bunks, but after their long day of travel, it seemed welcoming enough. Isaac efficiently built a fire in the stove while Tess arranged their meager supplies. Your uncle, Isaac said as they ate a simple dinner. What's his name? I might know of him. Thomas Foster. He has a place on the North Fork of Shell Creek. Isaac's brow furrowed. Foster. He seemed to be searching his memory. Older fellow, tall with a white beard, runs about 40 head of cattle. That sounds like him. Do you know him? Isaac's expression turned troubled. Miss Foster, I don't know how to tell you this, but Thomas Foster died last winter. Pneumonia took him during the January cold snap. Tess felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. That can't be right. I received his letter inviting me to come just 3 months ago. When was the letter dated? Tess thought back. It didn't say. I assumed it was recent. Isaac shook his head gently. Mail can take months to reach the east, especially from remote homesteads. And sometimes letters sit at trading posts for weeks before someone carries them onward. But his ranch, Tess said desperately. Surely it's still there? Perhaps someone else. The Blackburn brothers bought the place after he died. Not men I'd recommend seeking charity from. Isaac's voice had a hard edge to it. Tess sat in stunned silence, the implications washing over her. She had no home to go to, no family left, and her few possessions were in a wagon miles away. The enormity of her situation crushed down upon her, and despite her best efforts, tears began to well in her eyes. I'm sorry, she managed, turning away to hide her emotion. I don't know what to do now. Isaac moved to sit beside her, hesitantly placing a hand on her shoulder. We'll figure something out. You're not alone in this. His simple kindness broke the last of her composure. Tess covered her face with her hands as sobs shook her body. She felt Isaac's arm cautiously encircle her shoulders, offering comfort without presumption. You have options, he said softly when her tears had subsided. There's a decent settlement about 2 days' ride from here. Good people. They'd help you get established or find passage back east if that's what you want. I can't go back, Tess said, wiping her eyes. There's nothing for me there but men who wanted my father's business, not me. Isaac nodded, understanding. Then you'll go forward. One day at a time. They sat in silence for a while, the warmth of Isaac's arm around her providing more comfort than Tess would have thought possible from a man she'd known for only a day. Eventually, she straightened, embarrassed by her display of emotion. I'm sorry for burdening you with my troubles. No burden, Isaac replied simply. Get some rest. Morning will bring clearer thinking. Sleep didn't come easily to Tess that night. She lay on one of the bunks, listening to Isaac's steady breathing from across the small room, and tried to make sense of her new reality. The future she had planned helping her uncle with his ranch, building a new life had vanished. In its place was nothing but uncertainty. Morning arrived with steady rain that drummed against the shack's roof. They ate a quiet breakfast of the last of their provisions while discussing options. "We could retrieve your wagon today," Isaac suggested. "The rain will make travel slow, but your horse has had a night's rest. Then you'd have your possessions at least." Tess nodded, grateful for his practical approach. "And after that?" Isaac considered her question carefully. "You could stay at my cabin while you decide your next steps. It's not much, but it's shelter, and no one would bother you there." The offer surprised her. "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition," Isaac interrupted gently. "I can sleep in the stable if propriety concerns you." "That's not—" Tess stopped, blushing. "I meant that you've already done so much. I don't want to disrupt your life further." Isaac looked at her directly, his gaze steady. "Miss Foster, helping you hasn't been a disruption. Quite the opposite." Something in his tone made Tess's heart beat faster. She looked down at her hands. "Thank you. I accept your offer, at least until I can determine a better solution." They set out in the rain, retracing their path from the previous day. The going was indeed slow, the ground turning muddy and treacherous in places. Isaac remained attentive, ensuring Tess's safety at every difficult crossing. By mid-afternoon, they reached the spot where Tess's wagon stood. To their relief, it appeared untouched, and her horse greeted them with a hopeful whinny. Isaac examined the animal's leg. "The swelling's down. He should be able to pull the wagon at a slow pace." They secured the wagon, gathering anything useful that had been left behind. As Tess climbed onto the seat, ready to take the reins, Isaac stopped her. "Wait." He scanned the surrounding forest with narrowed eyes. "What is it?" Tess asked, suddenly alert. "Not sure. Just a feeling." He retrieved his rifle from its scabbard. "Start moving. I'll walk alongside." They proceeded cautiously. Tess kept glancing at Isaac, whose vigilance never wavered. His instincts proved correct when, less than a mile later, 3 riders appeared on the trail ahead. Isaac moved smoothly in front of the wagon, rifle held casually but ready. "Afternoon, gentlemen. Can we help you?" The lead rider, a stocky man with a pockmarked face, smiled without warmth. "Just wondering what brings folks to this particular stretch of road." "Ain't exactly a thoroughfare. Just passing through," Isaac replied evenly. "On our way home." The man's eyes shifted to Tess, his gaze lingering uncomfortably. "Pretty traveling companion you've got there." Tess felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp weather. "My wife and I would like to continue our journey," Isaac said, the lie sliding easily from his lips. "Day's getting on." The 3 men exchanged glances. The leader seemed to be calculating something. "Wouldn't be headed toward old Foster's place, would you? Heard he had family coming from back east." Tess stiffened at the mention of her uncle, but Isaac's expression remained neutral. "No, we have a place north of here. Now, if you'll excuse us." He made a subtle gesture for Tess to be ready to move. The tension stretched between them for several long seconds before the leader chuckled and gestured to his companions. "Well, don't let us keep you. Weather's turning nasty again." They moved their horses aside, but as Isaac and Tess passed, the leader called out, "Sullivan, isn't it? The trapper from Bitterroot Ridge." Isaac didn't turn around. "That's right. Thought so. We'll be seeing you around, Sullivan. Count on it." Only when the riders were well out of sight did Isaac relax slightly. "The Blackburn brothers," he explained grimly. "And their cousin. Bad men to cross. The ones who took my uncle's ranch." Tess asked. Isaac nodded. "They've been pushing out smaller ranchers, expanding their territory. They're not above using intimidation. Or worse. They knew who I was," Tess realized. "Or suspected. Which is why we need to get back to my cabin quickly. They won't be far behind once they realize who you are." They pushed hard for the remainder of the day, reaching Isaac's cabin as twilight descended. He immediately set about securing the horses and wagon while Tess brought her belongings inside. "Will they come here?" she asked as Isaac barred the door behind them. "Eventually," he replied honestly. "But not tonight, I think. They'll want to be sure first." Tess busied herself preparing a meal from Isaac's stores while he cleaned his weapons and placed them strategically around the small cabin. The domesticity of the scene struck her as oddly comforting despite the circumstances. Over dinner, they discussed plans. "In the morning, I'll ride to Cottonwood Springs," Isaac said. "There's a marshal there who should know about the Blackburns' activities. And I can send telegrams to verify your uncle's passing and the status of his property. I should come with you, Tess suggested. Isaac shook his head. Better if you stay here. The cabin's defensible, and they're less likely to find it without me leading them here. But if they do find it while you're gone, Isaac showed her where he kept his spare revolver and how to use it. Only as a last resort, he cautioned. If you hear anyone approaching, hide in the root cellar. There's an escape tunnel that leads to the hillside. The casual way he described these defenses told Tess this wasn't the first time Isaac had prepared for trouble. You've had enemies before, she observed. A shadow crossed his face. Not enemies, exactly. Just men who think the frontier has no laws worth following. That night, despite Isaac's protests, Tess insisted he take the bed while she used the bedroll by the fire. You're riding to town tomorrow, she reasoned. You need proper rest more than I do. He conceded reluctantly, and they settled into an awkward silence as the fire crackled between them. Isaac, Tess said after a while, why are you helping me? You could have simply taken me to the nearest town and been done with it. In the firelight, his expression was thoughtful. When I came west, I was broken. The war had taken parts of me I thought were essential. I believed I wanted solitude, that people were best kept at a distance. He paused, staring into the flames. But these past 2 days with you, I felt more alive than I have in years. More complete. The vulnerability in his confession moved Tess deeply. I understand, she said softly. After my father died, I felt hollowed out. Coming west was as much about running away as starting fresh. And now? Isaac asked. Tess considered the question. Now I'm not running anymore. Despite everything that's happened, for the first time since father's death, I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be. Their eyes met across the dimly lit room, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of kindred spirits, of shared understanding. Try to get some sleep, Isaac said finally. Tomorrow will come early enough. Morning arrived with a knock at the door that had them both instantly alert. Isaac motioned for Tess to take position in the bedroom with the spare revolver while he approached the door cautiously, his own weapon ready. Who's there? He called. Marshall Davis from Cottonwood Springs, Sullivan. Need to have a word. Isaac checked through a small viewing hole before relaxing slightly and opening the door. A tall man in a marshal's coat stood outside, looking grave. Morning, Sullivan. Sorry to disturb you so early. His eyes moved past Isaac to where Tess now stood in the bedroom doorway. Madam, he acknowledged with a tip of his hat. What brings you all the way out here, Marshal? Isaac asked, inviting the man inside. The Blackbins. Davis accepted a cup of coffee from Tess with a nod of thanks. They were in town yesterday, asking questions about a woman newly arrived from back east. Thomas Foster's niece, they said. Tess stepped forward. I'm Tess Foster. My uncle invited me to join him, but I've just learned he passed away last winter. The marshal's expression softened with sympathy. Yes, madam. Good man, your uncle. His passing was a loss to the whole county. What are the Blackbins planning? Isaac asked. Davis sighed. Nothing good. They've been claiming Foster's land was sold to them before his death. With Foster gone and no will on record, they've been able to stake their claim. If his niece were to appear with proof of kinship, they'd have a problem, Isaac finished. Exactly. The marshal turned to Tess. Do you have any documentation, Miss Foster? Letters, legal papers? Tess nodded. My father's correspondence with Uncle Thomas goes back years. And I have birth certificates showing our relation. That might be enough for the circuit judge to hear your case, Davis mused. But the Blackbins won't wait for legal proceedings. They'll try to eliminate the problem. Me? Tess said flatly. Yes, madam. Which is why I rode out here. Word is they're gathering men to come looking for you, and I don't have the deputies to stop them. Isaac's jaw tightened. When? Today, most likely. I'd suggest you both come to town where I can offer some protection, but I doubt we'd make it before they cut us off. Isaac was already moving, gathering ammunition and supplies. We'll head into the high country. I know places they won't find us. The marshal nodded. I'll ride to Junction City for reinforcements. The federal marshal there has been looking for an excuse to move against the Blackbins. This might be it. He drained his coffee and stood. Give me 2 days, Sullivan. Keep her safe until then. After the marshal departed, Isaac and Tess worked quickly to prepare. They packed food, warm clothing, and essentials onto Isaac's most sure-footed horse. We'll go on foot from where the trail ends, Isaac explained. There's an old trapper's cabin up in the high meadow. Few people know about it. As they finished their preparations, Isaac suddenly stopped and turned to Tess. You should know, this won't be easy. The terrain is rough, and we'll be moving fast. If you'd rather take your chances in town, no. Tess interrupted firmly. I'm not running away again, and I'm stronger than I look. Isaac searched her face, then nodded. I believe you are. They set out within the hour, Isaac leading them on a winding path that followed game trails rather than established routes. By midday, they had climbed high enough that Tess could look back and see the valley spread out below them, Isaac's cabin just a tiny speck in the distance. Beautiful, isn't it? Isaac said, noticing her gaze. Yes, Tess agreed. I can understand why you chose this place. They continued their ascent, the trail growing steeper. Isaac frequently offered his hand to help Tess over difficult sections, and she found herself holding on longer than necessary each time. By late afternoon, they reached a high meadow sheltered by towering pines. The trapper's cabin was well hidden, its weathered logs blending with the surrounding forest. Inside, it was even more basic than Isaac's cabin, just a single room with a stone fireplace and a rough plank bed, but its isolation made it perfect for their needs. Isaac settled their horse in a natural enclosure formed by boulders and fallen trees, while Tess prepared the cabin, sweeping away dust and arranging their supplies. We should be safe here, Isaac said when he returned. Even if they find my cabin, they won't know where to look for us. As night fell, they sat beside the small fire Isaac had built, sharing a simple meal. The close quarters of the cabin meant they were never more than an arm's length apart, and Tess found herself acutely aware of Isaac's every movement. Tell me about your life before the war, she said, wanting to know more about this quiet, complicated man. Isaac smiled slightly. Not much to tell. Grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania. My father built furniture when the weather was too poor for farming. Taught me the trade. Is that who you learned your craftsmanship from? I noticed the quality of the shelves in your cabin. Isaac looked pleased at her observation. Yes, he had a gift for seeing the potential in a piece of wood. Said every tree tells you what it wants to become if you listen closely enough. And did you listen? I tried. Isaac's smile turned wistful. I was just starting to understand when the war came. After that, well, I found it harder to hear anything except the memories for a long time. Tess reached out impulsively and took his hand. And now? Isaac looked down at their joined hands, then up to meet her eyes. Now I'm starting to hear other things again. Possibilities I'd stopped believing in. The intensity of his gaze made Tess's breath catch. She was suddenly very aware of how alone they were, how intimate the small cabin felt in the gathering darkness. Isaac, she began, but didn't know how to continue. He saved her from having to find the words by gently releasing her hand. We should rest. Tomorrow might be difficult. Tess nodded, disappointment and relief mingling confusingly. They arranged their bedding on opposite sides of the cabin, though the space was so small that they were still close enough to hear each other's breathing. Sleep eluded Tess for hours. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind filled with thoughts of Isaac, his gentle strength, the quiet understanding in his eyes, the way his hand felt around hers. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were a confusing mixture of danger and desire. She woke to find sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window and Isaac already up, tending the fire. He had prepared coffee and was roasting what appeared to be a rabbit. You went hunting? Tess asked, sitting up. Just checked some snares I had set last time I was here, he explained. Thought we could use a proper meal. They ate in companionable silence, the tension from the previous night seemingly forgotten. Afterward, Isaac suggested they stay close to the cabin but gather firewood and check the surrounding area for any signs of pursuit. The day passed peacefully. Tess found herself enjoying the simple tasks and Isaac's company more than she would have thought possible a week ago. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs and finding comfortable silence as often as conversation. As evening approached, they sat outside the cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. The beauty of the moment was so perfect that Tess felt a pang of sadness, knowing it couldn't last. What happens after this? She asked. After the marshal returns with reinforcements and deals with the Blackbins? Isaac was quiet for a long moment. That depends on what you want, Tess. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his voice made her heart beat faster. "I don't know what's possible anymore," she admitted. "My uncle's land might be mine by right, but I can't run a ranch alone." "You wouldn't have to be alone," Isaac said, his voice low. "Unless that's what you wanted." Tess turned to look at him, finding his eyes already on her. "What are you saying, Isaac?" He took a deep breath. "I'm saying that in 3 days, I've come to care for you more than I thought possible. I'm saying that the thought of you leaving once this is over makes me feel hollow inside." He reached out slowly and took her hand. "I'm saying that if you wanted to stay with me, I would do everything in my power to make you happy." Tess felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. "I was so focused on reaching my uncle, on having a plan, that I never considered the journey might lead me somewhere better." She leaned toward him, and Isaac met her halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question being asked and answered. When they parted, Tess saw in Isaac's eyes the same wonder she felt. "I don't want to leave," she whispered. "Not now, not ever." Their second kiss was deeper, years of loneliness dissolving in the connection between them. Isaac's arms encircled her, drawing her close, and Tess felt like she had finally found her way home. The sound of horses approaching shattered the moment. Isaac was instantly alert, pulling Tess to her feet and toward the cabin. "Stay inside," he ordered, reaching for his rifle. "Use the escape route if necessary." "I'm not leaving you," Tess protested. Before Isaac could argue, Marshal Davis's voice called out, "Sullivan, Miss Foster." "It's Marshal Davis." Relief flooded through them. Isaac lowered his rifle as the marshal rode into view, accompanied by 3 deputies and a distinguished-looking man in a suit. "You're early," Isaac called, still keeping Tess partially behind him. Davis dismounted with a tired smile. "Figured you'd appreciate that." Found the federal marshal already on his way to investigate the Blackburns. The man in the suit approached, extending his hand. "Marshal James Donovan, Miss Foster. I understand you've had some trouble with the Blackburn family." Over the next hour, they explained everything to Marshal Donovan, who listened with increasing interest. "The Blackburns have been operating with impunity for too long," he said when they finished. "Your case gives us the leverage we need to move against them." He turned to Tess. "Your documentation of kinship to Thomas Foster should be sufficient to establish your claim to his property, especially given the suspicious circumstances of its transfer." "And the Blackburns?" Isaac asked. "Already in custody," Davis replied with satisfaction. "They made the mistake of threatening me when I returned to town." Gave Marshal Donovan all the reason he needed to arrest them on the spot. Relief washed over Tess. "So it's over?" "Nearly," Donovan confirmed. "We'll need your testimony. But yes, the immediate danger has passed." They returned to town the following day, where Tess presented her documentation to the local judge. The process would take time, but the initial ruling was in her favor. The Blackburns' claim to her uncle's property was suspended pending a full investigation. As weeks passed, Tess settled into life at Isaac's cabin. What had begun as a temporary arrangement gradually transformed into something permanent. Isaac added a second room to the cabin, and together they made plans for expanding his small garden and adding more livestock. On a warm evening 6 months after wolves had surrounded her wagon and a stranger's gunfire had broken the darkness, Tess sat beside Isaac on the porch he had built for her, watching the sunset. "I received word from the land office today," she told him, taking his hand. "Uncle Thomas's property is officially mine." Isaac squeezed her hand gently. "That's wonderful news." "I've been thinking," Tess continued, "about what to do with it. And I'd like to sell it," she said simply. "This is my home now. Here, with you." Isaac turned to her, his eyes filled with emotion. "Are you certain? It's good land, a solid inheritance." "I'm certain," Tess replied. "Besides, we could use the money to build a proper house. This cabin is lovely, but if we're going to start a family someday." She trailed off, suddenly shy. Isaac's face lit up with joy. "A family," he repeated softly. He leaned forward and kissed her gently. "Yes, I'd like that very much." As twilight deepened around them, Tess thought about the night wolves had surrounded her wagon, how terrified she had been, how certain that her journey west had been a terrible mistake. Now, sitting beside the man she loved, watching the first stars appear in the Wyoming sky, She knew it had been the beginning of her greatest adventure, one that would last a lifetime.